She wasn't crying because she was weak.
The day she broke down. She wasn't crying because she was weak. She cried because she was tired of being strong. This story begins on an unusually cold Monday morning in a quiet American suburban school where everything looks normal on the outside, kids laughing, teachers rushing, the usual morning chaos, but inside one of the hallways, a single mother named Zoya was fighting her own silent storm. She had just left the principal's office after hearing that her son, Daniel, had been struggling again. Not because he wasn't smart, but because the world was asking a little boy to grow up too fast. She tried to walk normally, but her steps felt heavier with every breath. Her hands were shaking, her backpack strap slipped again, and the moment she reached the end of the hallway away from teachers, away from kids, she finally broke. She leaned against the wall, lowered herself to the floor, and the tears came before she could stop them. They weren't loud, they weren't dramatic. They were the kind of tears a mother cries only when she's reached the limit of pretending to be okay. She cupped her hands over her face, her body trembling, whispering just 1 minute. Please, just let me breathe for 1 minute. But life doesn't care about minutes. Life doesn't wait. And just when she thought she had a second to hide her pain, something shocking happened. Someone placed a warm, gentle hand on her shoulder. She froze. She hadn't heard footsteps. She thought she was alone. When she slowly lifted her face, she saw Alia's single father she barely knew. His expression wasn't confused or awkward. It was concerned, deeply concerned. "Zoya, what happened?" he asked softly. She tried to smile and shake her head, but the words wouldn't come out. Then something unexpected happened. Real shock for her. She saw tears in his eyes too. Not for himself, but for her. It was the kind of empathy she hadn't seen in years. As if her pain had reached him without a single word. She whispered, "I'm fine. Don't worry." But Ollie gently shook his head and said, "No, you're not. And you don't have to pretend with me." And that was the moment she lost the last bit of strength she'd been holding onto. She covered her mouth and sobbed harder, and instead of stepping back, Ollie moved closer. He didn't touch her again, didn't invade her space. He just sat beside her on the cold school floor, shoulder to shoulder, like someone who understood every invisible battle she had fought. Zoya cried like she hadn't cried in years. And in between sobs, she said something that broke Ollie completely. "I am so tired of being everything. I'm tired of being mum, dad, doctor, teacher, protector. I'm tired of being strong when all I want to do is scream." Ollie lowered his head, his voice breaking as he said, "You think you're alone, but you're not. I know exactly what that feels like." She looked at him through blurred eyes, surprised. "You," she whispered. He nodded and quietly said, "Yes. There are nights I cry in the car so my daughter doesn't see me. There are days I skip meals so she doesn't have to. I know what it feels like to break quietly." Those words hit her harder than any advice, because for the first time, someone wasn't telling her to stay strong. Someone was telling her, "I see your pain. The school bell rang loudly. Kids ran out laughing, teachers shouting instructions, but inside that hallway, time had stopped. Suddenly, Daniel and Aisha came running toward them. Daniel's eyes widened, seeing his mum's tear-stained face, and he instantly panicked. "Mum, did something happen? Is someone hurting you?" he asked, fear shaking his small voice. That question, so pure, so protective, shattered her heart all over again. She pulled him into her arms and said, "No, baby, nobody hurt me. I'm just tired." But the shocking part was Daniel's reaction. He hugged her tight and whispered, "Then you can rest on me. I'll take care of you today." A child comforting a parent. It was heartbreaking and beautiful at the same time. Ollie watched quietly, his eyes filling again. Even Aisha stepped forward shyly, offering Zoya her tiny hand. "My dad cries too sometimes," she said innocently, "but I hug him and it gets better. Maybe my hug will help you too." Zoya couldn't help it. She cried again, but this time for a different reason. She wasn't alone anymore. They all walked outside together, the warm afternoon sun hitting their faces. The playground noise behind them faded as they sat at a wooden bench under a tree. Ali pulled out 2 juice boxes from his bag and handed them to the kids. Then he turned to Zoya and said something that stopped her breath. "You know, the strongest people break the quietest, but the most beautiful healing happens when someone finally sees you fall." For a moment, she couldn't speak. No one had ever said anything like that to her. As the kids played in front of them, Ollie gently shared something shocking, something he had never told anyone. "The night my wife left us, I sat on the kitchen floor for 3 hours holding my daughter's baby blanket, wondering how I was supposed to do this alone. That's why I recognize your pain, because I've lived it." Zoya didn't know whether to look at him or cry again. The fact that this man who always looked calm, composed, and strong had fallen apart to made her realize something powerful. Strong people don't look strong. They survive silently. As the sun began to set, the sky painted in orange and purple. Daniel and Aisha ran around laughing, throwing leaves, playing their little made-up games. Zoya watched them and whispered, "He's still happy. Even with everything he goes through, he's still happy." Ollie smiled softly and said, "Kids don't need perfect parents. They just need parents who try. And you're trying harder than anyone I've ever seen." That compliment hit her heart like a warm wave. When they finally walked to the parking lot, something beautiful happened. Daniel grabbed Ali's hand on one side and Zoya's hand on the other, linking them together without even realizing. For a moment, it felt like a family, not a perfect one, but a real one. That night, after putting Daniel to bed, Zoya stood by her apartment window looking out at the quiet American neighborhood. The streetlights flickered, cars hummed in the distance, and the world finally felt slower. She replayed the moments in her mind, breaking down in the hallway, Ollie sitting beside her, the kids' hugs, the honesty, the vulnerability, the comfort. She placed a hand on her chest and whispered, "Maybe I don't have to carry everything alone anymore." For the first time in years, she cried again. But this time it wasn't out of exhaustion. It was out of relief, out of gratitude, out of hope. Because sometimes life breaks you just so the right people can help put you back together. And that was the day she broke down, and the day she began to heal.